Welcome to the deep dive. We cut through the noise to get you the insights that matter. And today, we're doing something a bit different, actually. A deep dive into a pretty rare sort of surprise interview with a global leader. Some really unexpected stuff came out of it.
Yeah, just picture this for a second. You're a seasoned foreign correspondent. You've been chasing this interview for days. We're talking about Gary O'Donoghue, the BBC's chief North America correspondent. He was trying to get time with Donald Trump, specifically to mark a year since that assassination attempt he'd covered. He'd had false alarms, lots of waiting around, gives up, finally crashes out for a nap, and
Right.
then phone rings.
Ah,
He's half asleep, picks up, and it's a press secretary saying, hi, I'm here with the president. Here you go. Just like that, he gets the call from Trump.
exactly. And so what we'll do in this deep dive is really dissect O'Donoghue's own account of that call. It was, what, almost 20 minutes. And we're drawing directly from his BBC piece, the one called How Trump Woke Me Up for Surprise Interview and the Key Takeaways. Right. So our mission here basically is to pull out the most important insights from this, totally off-the-cuff conversation. It gives this unique window into how the former president thinks about things, everything from personal moments to big global issues. Why should you care? Well, because this kind of unscripted chat, it often reveals things, facets you just don't get in those formal, prepared settings. It's kind of a shortcut to understanding key perspectives driving things on the world stage. Okay, so let's unpack this then. O'Donoghue points out Trump does this sometimes, right? Calls reporters seemingly out of the blue, prefers these unscripted calls over, formal sit-downs. And like we said, O'Donoghue had been trying for days about the anniversary of the assassination attempt. He'd even had that false alarm calls coming in minutes, then nothing. Then bam, the actual call comes from Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt while he's actually asleep.
And what O'Donoghue says is really fascinating is how he felt he saw a different side of Trump during this call. For someone who often comes across as shooting from the hip, O'Donoghue picked up on these moments of reflection, long pauses even. Things he notes are, quote, rarely seen.
That vulnerability piece is really striking, isn't it? When O'Donoghue asked him about the assassination attempt, he describes Trump sounding pretty vulnerable. Trump said he tries not to dwell on it because if I did, it would be, might be life-changing. I don't want it to have to be that. He even brought up the power of positive thinking or the power of positive non-thinking. I mean, what do you think O'Donoghue's getting at there? And what does that moment tell us about him?
Well, it feels like a rare glimpse behind the usual public persona, doesn't it? O'Donoghue stressing it's rarely seen really underlines that. It makes you wonder maybe that positive non-thinking is sort of a wider coping strategy he uses. And speaking of guarded, O'Donoghue also mentions another long pause, this time when he asked Trump if he trusted Vladimir Putin. And Trump's eventual answer, I trust almost nobody, to be honest with you.
Wow, that's quite a statement. What do you make of that, especially thinking about his foreign policy? How does that filter through?
Yeah, O'Donoghue suggests that I trust almost nobody isn't just, a throwaway line. It might actually be a core part of how he sees relationships generally, personal, political, maybe all of it. And that kind of deep distrust, it could lead to a really transactional approach,
Yeah.
where alliances and agreements are constantly being weighed, maybe based on immediate benefit rather than long-term trust or partnership.
Interesting. Okay. So moving from those sort of personal insights to actual policy,
Hmm.
O'Donoghue pushed him on domestic stuff too, specifically the mass deportations plan.
Hmm.
Trump apparently insisted his team did a great job fulfilling promises, and he cited a drastic decrease in migrants crossing the southern border.
Yeah.
But O'Donoghue adds this bit of nuance that even some of Trump's own people have apparently been frustrated, maybe with the pace of deportations.
That's a key point O'Donoghue includes. And when he pressed Trump for a specific number, like how many deportations in a second term, Trump wouldn't give one. He just said, I don't put a number on, but I want to get the criminals out quickly, and we're doing that, as you know. And he added, they're bringing them to El Salvador, lots of other places.
It does raise that question for you, listening, doesn't it? How do you interpret it when a leader talks about policy success but avoids concrete numbers in a complex area like this? Makes measuring things, or accountability, kind of tricky, definitely. Okay, let's shift gears again. Foreign policy. Back to Putin for a moment. O'Donoghue says Trump expressed clear frustration with Putin during the call. And this was actually on the same day Trump had threatened Moscow with secondary sanctions. If a Ukraine deal wasn't reached in 50 days, Trump apparently sounded perplexed that he hadn't managed to get a deal done yet, especially since promising to end the war quickly was a big campaign point.
Right. And putting that into context, Trump seemed to point to this gap,
Yeah.
between what Putin says and what happens. He recalled something like, I thought we had a deal done 4 times, and then you go home and you see we just attacked a nursing home or something in Kiev. I said, what the hell is that all about? Now, Ukrainian leaders, European leaders, they're probably used to hearing doubts like that. But O'Donohue notes when he asked Trump if he was finished with Putin, Trump said, I'm not done with him, but I'm disappointed in him.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's a nuanced position, isn't it? Even while threatening sanctions. Suggests he still maybe sees some way to engage despite the frustration.
Yeah, it's not quite closing the door. Now, here's something potentially really significant. A policy shift O'Donohue noticed. He observed a new tone on NATO from Trump. You probably remember Trump used to call NATO obsolete, big headlines back then. But in this interview, he said it was becoming the opposite of that. And this chat happened right after he'd hosted the NATO chief Mark Reed. Seems they get on okay and announced the U.S. would sell weapons to NATO to then pass on to Kyiv.
And the fascinating part of this pivot, according to O'Donohue, is how Trump seemed to be sort of letting go of that old grudge, the one about the U.S. paying way more than allies for NATO defense. He told O'Donohue, it was very unfair because the United States paid for almost 100% of it, but now they're paying their own bills, and I think that's much better. Which seems to be him referencing that recent pledge by NATO members, right, to boost defense spending towards 5% of GDP. And Trump apparently declared quite proudly, we changed NATO a lot. So O'Donohue frames this not just as a public stance shift, but maybe a genuine feeling of accomplishment for Trump, feeling he's made NATO fairer financially.
Right, taking credit for that shift. Okay, finally, let's touch on something a bit lighter, but still pretty insightful. Trump's view on the UK and the current Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. Now, Starmer's a liberal, obviously, but Trump said, I really like the Prime Minister a lot. This was apparently just after they'd signed some agreement on removing trade barriers, and Trump stressed the U.S.-UK relationship is still special, believed the UK would fight alongside the U.S. if it came to it.
Yeah, and O'Donohue noticed Trump seemed pretty relaxed about things that might usually be seen as, snubs, like not giving a speech to Parliament on his state visit. Trump apparently just shrugged it off, said something like, let them go and have a good time. He called King Charles a great gentleman, even cracked a joke about all the UK's names, something like, you got more names than any other country in history, I think. It just offers this little glimpse, doesn't it, into how he interacts with foreign leaders, even casually. Maybe shows how personal rapport, that sense of shared history, can sometimes matter quite a bit in his diplomatic style.
Absolutely. So this whole deep dive, just based on one unexpected phone call, it really shows how much you can actually learn from these unscripted moments, right? From, surprising vulnerability, reflections on trauma,
Yeah.
to these subtle shifts on huge global issues like NATO, the war in Ukraine, and even those lighter diplomatic observations. It just felt like a unique window into his thinking.
Exactly. And if you step back and think about it, it really highlights how these less formal interactions, the ones that seem kind of off the cuff, they can actually give you really significant insights into a leader's priorities, their perspectives, even how they personally react to big, challenging events. It's just a good reminder, I think, that important information doesn't always come from the official statement or the planned press conference. It can pop up in the most unexpected ways.
So what does this all mean for you listening? What kind of insights can you really get when a public figure seems to prefer these surprising, unscripted moments over the carefully managed formal interviews? And maybe what does that preference itself tell us about where political communication might be heading? Something to think about.